Hello again, this is the Prim Reaper, and this will be the fourth video in my series critiquing a few lists of feminist issues. Since the last video focused on an issue I thought was quite important, so important that it spawned its own response video, I thought I would lighten things up with this one and go back to some of the more frivolous issues on these lists. Also, I've been mainly focusing on only one article from the three that I've linked every time, or have been talking about issues that all three articles mention. This time, I'll pick a few specifics off of each one because I'm feeling fancy today. For my first pick at the smorgasbord, I figure I'll start with the article I've been mainly using and look at the issue breastfeeding. I'll have to admit, when I started reading the details on this one, I was a little confused. It shows an example of a woman who was made to cover up when breastfeeding. As far as I knew, breastfeeding in public was generally accepted and even sometimes legally protected in most areas of the Western world. Even the article this portion links to mentions that there's a specific act in the UK where this happened, the Equality Act 2010, which forbids anyone from asking a breastfeeding woman to leave a public place. According to Wikipedia, the vast majority of areas in the world view breastfeeding as uncontroversial, and several areas, including 49 states in America, Australia, and as I've already mentioned, the UK, have passed legislations explicitly stating that women are allowed to breastfeed in public. So as far as I can tell, this woman should have just told the person who asked her to cover up to eat shit and just try and make her move if she refused to get up. Again, even in the article, the hotel at which this incident took place issued an apology for what happened. Total non-issue. Back to the original article then. It says that mothers across the world have shown their support for public breastfeeding by posting breastfeeding selfies, which just makes me roll my eyes, honestly. I have absolutely nothing at all against public breastfeeding. After all, that's really what they're for. But at the same time, it's a little obnoxious to be like, hey everyone else, look at me, I'm breastfeeding my baby, check this out, and then turn your nose up at anyone who's made even slightly uncomfortable by that. By drawing attention to it and posting photos as though you're fighting the man by doing so, you're kind of the one behaving like you're doing something taboo. Really, I think the best course of action is to stay the course, feed your baby as nature intended, and if anyone has an alternate opinion on the matter, you can politely tell them to direct their attention elsewhere, or not so politely tell them to cram their opinion down whichever orifice is most convenient for them. If public breastfeeding is already legal, and in most places, excepting areas like Saudi Arabia, it is, there's really not much else you can do about it. But then we get to the next line. But more still needs to be done to end the sexualization of women's bodies. Oh no. Oh, my sweet summer child.
That's the funniest damn thing I've ever heard!
Oh boy.
And in other news, prominent feminist groups sought to end the notion that water is wet, the sky is blue, and also to challenge the law of gravity because, and I quote, it is a tool of the patriarchy. This and other stories at 7 on Impossible Goals Weekly.
I don't even know what to say about this. Rather than simply telling people who stare to take a hike, these guys literally state that they would rather seek to upend the very concept of sexuality, of male attraction to the female form, so that they no longer have to worry about anyone giving them the side eye when they breastfeed. End the sexualization of women's bodies. Wow. Talk about cutting off your nose. No, this is like cutting off your entire face to spite your face. Why the hell would you want to end sexualization as a whole? Did you forget how babies are made in the first place? Dude. But hey, speaking of ending the sexualization of women's bodies... Yup, that's right. The next issue I'll be talking about is the issue of real women. And I'm pretty sure I can't find finger quotes big enough to accommodate that term. Let's be honest here. We know exactly what feminists are talking about when they use the phrase real in this context. They're implying that some bodies are more real than others. It's one thing to protest the use of Photoshop to artificially enhance models on magazines or advertisements, but that's usually not what people are talking about when they say real women have curves or bones are for dogs, meat is for men. Conversely, you see a lot of double standards going on with this discussion where Everyone is beautiful. But ladies on the smaller side of the BMI chart need to pick up a cheeseburger. As the average clothing size increases worldwide, you see the word anorexic being tossed around more and more, whether or not the person in the image actually qualifies. This topic rubs me the wrong way for two reasons. First of all, the glorification of obesity should not be seen as a good thing. And before I go any further, I want to stress that I do not hate overweight or obese people, and I think it's just as rude and obnoxious as any other form of bullying to pick on someone for their weight. However, suggesting to people that being obese is unhealthy is not picking on people. It's a medical fact. There are a number of health risks involved with being obese, including the increased incidence of diabetes, stroke, heart disease, cancer, sleep apnea, and many others. Many of my own family members have had their lives cut tragically short by obesity-related complications. And before anyone mentions genetics, most of those in my family who managed to maintain a normal weight have, funny enough, lived to a ripe old age. A lot of these risks really don't begin to manifest until older age, so those who state that they are obese and yet healthy are, unfortunately, unlikely to remain so for long. Now, I'm not saying that all thin people are healthy, but I am saying that obesity in itself is never healthy, despite how many people these days are trying to deny it, and people who choose to remain obese are increasing their risks for many additional health problems down the road. It's not a guarantee. Some smokers manage to avoid cancer, for example, but it is an increased risk for sure. The other reason this topic bothers me is because as a slender woman myself, I resent the notion that my body is any less real than anyone else's. I work my ass off to maintain my figure, both in proper tracking and maintenance of calorie intake and through exercise. I certainly don't starve myself like some folks seem to believe. Hell, I indulge in junk food pretty regularly, but the important part is that it's all in moderation. People that say my figure isn't real don't sound like strong, confident women proud of their body type. They sound like they're just trying to make excuses as to why they aren't smaller. Man, I see so many excuses from some people, and I feel like a lot of them can be relatively easily challenged. I can't afford to eat healthy. So eat less of what you can afford then. Surely it would cost even less to overeat on junk food. I'm injured, so I can't exercise. So reduce the amount of calories you eat to match your reduced energy expenditure. After all, diet is supposed to be 80% calorie intake and only 20% exercise. I have X condition preventing me from losing weight. Very few conditions actually prevent weight loss. There are several that can result in lethargy or increased appetite that can make it more difficult to resist eating more and exercising less. But with proper medication and a little extra willpower, okay, sometimes a lot extra, these conditions can be managed. Prader-Willi Syndrome, for example, results in insatiable hunger and chronic overeating and therefore frequently leads to obesity. But fortunately, this condition only affects 1 in 10 to 30,000 people. On the other hand, hypothyroidism, a disorder often cited as a reason for weight gain, is really only attributable to about 5 to 10 additional pounds. Again, I'm not saying that it's impossible for some conditions to make it easier to gain weight and more difficult to lose it, but to actively say that they prevent weight loss is just purely incorrect. Hell, you know what I'd love to see? Someone who drops all of the excuses, acknowledges that they just love them some tasty food and that they'd rather be a larger size and accept the health risks that come along with it than to give up their favorite munchies. In that case, I'd say, you know what? Cool. I can understand. Hell, there are times when I wish I could binge on sushi until I burst. Good for you for accepting your personal weaknesses. I would respect that person a hell of a lot more than someone who makes excuses and behaves like thin people are some mystical, unattainable form. So anyway, to get back on point, this article expresses the hope that the definition of beauty is expanding to include women of all ages, shapes, sizes, and scars. That they look forward to the day when cultural commentary doesn't have a stake in women's bodies. God damn it, the word beauty has a specific definition. If you keep trying to expand the definition so that absolutely everything fits within it, you're making the word meaningless. Coincidentally, one of the videos I'm planning in the future will be on the radical left's misuse of words, and this one is included in that list. I've found it simultaneously amusing and annoying that of all things, these folks want to expand the word beautiful. Of all the positive traits that you could highlight or cultivate, intelligence, creativity, kindness, an interesting personality, traits that will stretch across the course of a lifetime when physical beauty begins to wither, nope. To hell with those things. I want to be beautiful. And if I have to fight ingrained biological standards of beauty, markers of fertility, markers of strength, markers of health to accomplish that, so bloody be it. Well, I'm sorry to be the one to have to tell you this, but on the whole, it's just not going to happen. You can fill high fashion magazines cover to cover with all the old and obese women you like, but except for the people who are into that sort of thing, you're not going to be titillating the vast majority of folks with this kind of beauty. Sometimes we can ponder whether our culture came from our biology or whether our biology was altered by our culture, but this is not one of those cases. We find beautiful what we find beautiful because of biological reasons, and the media that portrays these beautiful people is more likely to sell. Or, to offend people who don't look like the pictures, but hey. Also, in case it wasn't plainly obvious, cultural commentary has plenty of stake in men's bodies as well. Or have you not seen what men in advertisements typically look like? Notice how there's rarely any push for the word beauty to expand to men who don't fit the cultural commentary? I wonder why that is. Anyway, that's enough on this point. The last thing I'll be talking about in this video that gets mentioned in the third article I'm looking at is the division of labor. These ladies complain that their men don't do their fair share of the laundry, the dishes, the cooking, whatever else they want done around the house. Now, I doubt that every situation is the same with everyone, so I'm going to run down a simple list of how best to address this problem that should cover a wide variety of possibilities. Number 1. Communicate with him. I know that this is a crazy prospect for some gals, but if you ask him nicely to help you with chores, maybe even throw in a please and a thank you occasionally, in most cases, he'll probably be happy to do so. Number 1.5. Make sure that you're not complaining every time your significant other does a job that doesn't measure up to your exacting standards. Pointing out little misses or offering constructive tips is just fine, but if all you're doing is bitching about how nobody else can do anything right, of course he's not going to want to help. Number 2. Establish a distribution of chores. This falls into that whole communication thing, but if you both work different hours or different kinds of jobs, sometimes one party can feel like they're being overburdened at home as a result. If one person works a harder or longer job, you can have the person who worked the easier job pick up more of the house duties. If you both have excellent jobs, perhaps consider a housekeeper. Number 3. If 1 and 2 fail, because sometimes that happens, have a sit down and tell him you feel the situation is unfair or that he's not listening to your needs. Don't waste time trying to be passive-aggressive and only clean your spaces or your half of the clothes. It'll just make you look like an asshole and will only lead to arguments, which is not productive. So many people are more concerned about being right than they are about solving the issue. So finally, if you sit down and speak with him directly and an arrangement can still not be met, it's time to, number 4, reevaluate the relationship. Solved. It seems like feminists are really good about turning these kinds of simple problems into rocket science. Either they're getting really unlucky and continually dating just the most outdated Neanderthal men that think women only belong in the kitchen, or they really take issue with simply asking for help. I mean, I know what it's like to date a guy that absolutely refuses to do his fair share around the house. I know they do exist, but I learned from my mistake though. I wound up ending that relationship for many more reasons than just that, mind you. But either way, in the future, I made sure that I checked these kinds of compatibilities more thoroughly, and it was never an issue again. Anyway, they go on to state that because women are paid less than men, they're more likely to give up their jobs to enter a world of underpaid drudgery. I'm going to give them a probably undeserved benefit of the doubt here and assume they're not talking about a pay gap. I've got my eye on you. But immediately after they refer to homemaking in the ever so flattering flowery words underpaid drudgery, they state in the very next sentence that it should go without saying that making the choice to stay at home is as admirable as any work. Well, which is it? Because you can't at once talk about something as though it's on par with toilet scrubbing and then in the next sentence say it's admirable. How patronizing can you get? Oh, you're a homemaker? How wonderful for you! I know as a tenured professor of sociology, I'd rather chop off my left butt cheek than return to the underpaid drudgery of housework. But I just want you to know that I really admire what you're doing. Yeah, okay. But at least they go on to talk about a few solutions that could help the situation. Paternity leave, subsidized childcare. Thank you. Look at that. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Nice, even-handed suggestions that would help both mothers and fathers alike. I knew I was giving them too much credit. And look at that. What do you know? The very next minute, the stopped clock is wrong again. Anyway, that's enough fun and excitement for today, I think. There are only a few more issues I intend to talk about from these lists, but some of them are so nebulous and overreaching that they'll probably require their own videos to talk about them in full. I also wanted to thank Honey Badger Radio for having me on their show again last week, and as before, I'll link to that discussion below so that you can check it out if you so desire. For now, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.